The ultimate risk of space exploration. Space is amazing, but it's also deadly. For every moment of awe and wonder, there's a risk that something could go horribly wrong. And when it does, it's not just a technical failure, it's people, real people, who pay the price with their lives. Going to space isn't like flying on an airplane or taking a road trip. It's a dangerous mission from the moment the rocket lifts off. The fuel is explosive, the temperatures swing between extreme heat and cold, and one tiny mistake can mean the end. And sometimes the worst happens. When it does, it isn't always quick or painless. Some astronauts died in explosions, others burned alive, some were crushed, and a few were wide awake as their spacecraft slowly ran out of air. These are the kinds of space disasters that don't just break machines, they break hearts. In this video, we're going deep into the most painful space deaths ever. Not just the ones that made headlines, but the ones that made history. We'll talk about the accidents that shocked the world and some that were kept secret for years. We'll look at what went wrong, how people tried to survive, and why these stories still matter today. This isn't about scaring you. It's about remembering the men and women who gave everything to push the limits of what's possible. Because even in their worst moments, they were heroes. So get ready. This is the dark side of space travel and the true cost of reaching for the stars. Second Apollo 1, 1967, trapped in a firestorm. It was supposed to be a simple test. No launch, no liftoff, just a routine check of the systems on the launch pad. But what happened to the Apollo 1 crew on January 27, 1967, would become one of the most horrifying tragedies in space history. The astronauts, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee, were inside the capsule, running through a checklist. The spacecraft was sealed. The cabin was filled with pure oxygen, which NASA used at the time to simulate space conditions. What they didn't fully understand yet was just how dangerous that could be. Inside that small space, one spark was all it took. No one knows exactly where the spark came from, but it lit up the cabin in seconds. The oxygen-fed fire spread so fast the astronauts didn't even have time to open the hatch. And that's the most heartbreaking part. The hatch opened inward. Pressure from the fire made it almost impossible to pull open quickly. Grissom, White, and Chaffee were fighting for their lives in a blazing inferno, trapped in their seats. The recording from the test picked up the sound of Chaffee shouting, "We've got a fire in the cockpit!" Then, silence. By the time ground crew got the hatch open, it was already too late. The heat had burned through their suits. The air inside had turned to toxic smoke, and all three men were gone. This wasn't just a terrible accident. It was a wake-up call. The investigation found dozens of problems. Flammable materials inside the cabin, poor emergency procedures, bad wiring. NASA was shaken to its core, but something powerful came from it. The program was paused and completely redesigned. They got rid of the pure oxygen system, improved the hatch, and overhauled safety protocols. It took over a year to get back on track, but when Apollo 11 finally landed on the moon in 1969, it was built on the lessons learned from Apollo 1. Still, that doesn't erase the pain of what happened. These weren't just astronauts. They were fathers, husbands, and American heroes. And they died not in space, but right here on Earth, just steps away from a dream they never got to finish. Third Soyuz 1, 1967, a fatal crash landing. Just 3 months after Apollo 1, another tragedy was unfolding, this time in the Soviet Union. The mission was Soyuz 1, and the man on board was cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov. He knew the spacecraft had problems. He flew it anyway. Before launch, engineers had reported over 200 design issues with the Soyuz capsule. The mission should have been delayed, maybe even canceled. But politics pushed it forward. The Soviets wanted a big win in space fast. And Komarov, a national hero and experienced pilot, was chosen for the job. From the moment Soyuz 1 reached orbit, things went wrong. One solar panel failed to open, leaving the craft without enough power. The navigation system glitched. The radio signal kept cutting out. Komarov tried everything to fix it, but he was stuck in a broken machine, flying miles above Earth, and he knew it. Then came the worst part, trying to come home. On April 24, 1967, After orbiting the planet 18 times, Komarov began his descent. The atmosphere tore at the capsule, and the parachutes were supposed to slow it down. But the main chute never opened. The backup got tangled. The spacecraft slammed into the ground at over 300 miles per hour. The force of the impact crushed the capsule. It exploded in a ball of fire. When recovery teams reached the site, all they found was a burned-out shell and Komarov's body, barely recognizable. Here's the part that haunts people. According to reports from U.S. intelligence and later interviews, Komarov knew he was going to die. He stayed in contact with mission control until the very end. Some even say he screamed in rage, cursing the officials who sent him on a doomed mission. Whether or not that's true, what's clear is this. Komarov died a hero, trapped in a machine he knew wasn't ready, trying to do his duty anyway. His sacrifice forced the Soviet space program to face its flaws and fix them. But nothing could undo what happened to him, a lone man falling from the sky, powerless to stop it. 4th Soyuz 11, 1971. Silent suffocation in space. Soyuz 11 was a record-breaking mission. It sent 3 cosmonauts, Georgy Dobrovolsky, Viktor Patsayev, and Vladislav Volkov, to the world's first space station, Salyut 1. They stayed in orbit for over 3 weeks, doing experiments and setting a new milestone for human spaceflight. But none of them made it home alive. Everything seemed to go fine during re-entry on June 30th, 1971. Ground control followed the capsule as it re-entered Earth's atmosphere and landed softly in Kazakhstan. But when recovery teams opened the hatch, they found all 3 men dead in their seats. No crash, no fire. Just 3 lifeless bodies frozen in silence. What happened? It turned out that during re-entry, a tiny valve opened too early. That valve, meant to equalize cabin pressure with Earth's atmosphere, had accidentally opened in the vacuum of space. It caused the cabin to depressurize in seconds. None of the cosmonauts were wearing pressure suits. At the time, the cramped Soyuz capsule didn't allow room for them. The crew didn't stand a chance. Within seconds, they lost consciousness. Their hearts stopped less than a minute later. The most chilling part? Their bodies showed signs of struggle. Volkov's fingers were bleeding. Patsayev had bruises on his face. That meant they were awake when the pressure started dropping, and they fought to fix it. But there was no escape, no emergency option, no backup system. Just 3 men trying to survive a silent killer in the most hostile place imaginable. After this disaster, the Soviet Space Agency made pressure suits mandatory for every mission. They also redesigned the Soyuz capsule to prevent this kind of accident from ever happening again. But like every fix in spaceflight, it came too late for the crew of Soyuz 11. They are still the only humans to die in space, outside Earth's atmosphere. No explosion, no crash. Just the slow, invisible horror of suffocation, floating miles above their home planet. The Space Shuttle Challenger, 1986. A Nation's Tragedy, January 28, 1986. Millions of people across America were glued to their TVs, watching history in the making. The Space Shuttle Challenger was about to launch, with a civilian school teacher, Krista McAuliffe, on board. It was a moment of pride, hope, and excitement. Then, 73 seconds after liftoff, everything changed. Without warning, Challenger exploded in midair, breaking apart into a cloud of smoke and fire. Pieces of the shuttle rained down into the Atlantic Ocean. The world was stunned. In classrooms across the country, children watched their heroes disappear. At first, everyone thought the crew had died instantly. But as investigators dug deeper, a darker possibility came to light. They may have survived the explosion. Here's what we know. The explosion wasn't really an explosion. It was a structural breakup. The shuttle didn't blow up in one fireball. It came apart because of a flaw in one of the solid rocket boosters. A rubber seal called an O-ring failed in the freezing morning air, allowing flames to leak through and destroy the fuel tank. The crew cabin, the part where the astronauts sat, didn't disintegrate right away. It actually stayed intact and continued rising, then falling for almost 3 minutes before crashing into the ocean at over 200 miles per hour. That means the 7 astronauts were alive, or at least conscious, for some or all of that terrifying fall. Switches on the control panels inside the cabin had been flipped after the breakup, which means the crew tried to do something. Some experts believe they were trying to restore power or air pressure. Others may have been bracing for impact. There were no pressure suits, no escape system, and no chance of survival. It was one of the most painful moments in American history, not just because of the lives lost, but because of how public it all was. Everyone saw it happen. Everyone felt the shock. The country mourned together. The Challenger disaster led to a full suspension of the shuttle program and a complete overhaul of NASA's safety systems. It took 32 months before another shuttle launched again. Krista McAuliffe, Francis Scobie, Michael Smith, Judith Resnick, Ronald McNair, Ellison Onizuka, and Gregory Jarvis. These were the 7 souls aboard Challenger. They weren't just astronauts. They were symbols of hope, courage, and exploration. Their legacy lives on, but so does the pain of what happened that day. 6th Space Shuttle Columbia, 2003. Disintegration upon re-entry. On February 1, 2003, the crew of Space Shuttle Columbia was finally heading home after 16 days in space. They had completed a successful science mission and were just minutes away from landing in Florida. Families were waiting, cameras were rolling. Then, Columbia vanished from radar. High above Texas, the shuttle tore apart in the sky. It left behind streaks of smoke, burning debris and shattered hearts. The cause? A small piece of foam. During launch, a chunk of insulation foam broke off from the external fuel tank and hit the left wing of the shuttle. NASA saw it happen, but no one thought it was a major threat. Foam had fallen off before. The shuttle had always survived, but this time, it punched a hole in the wing's thermal protection tiles that were supposed to shield the shuttle from the extreme heat of re-entry. As Columbia came back into Earth's atmosphere, hot plasma, hotter than 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, rushed into the wing. The aluminum frame inside started melting. The shuttle became unstable, and within seconds it broke apart at 12,000 miles per hour. There were no survivors. All 7 astronauts, Rick Husband, William McCool, Michael Anderson, Ilan Ramon, Kalpana Chawla, David Brown, and Laurel Clark, were lost. But here's the haunting part. Like Challenger, the breakup didn't happen instantly. The crew may have known something was wrong. The cockpit voice recorder captured conversations just seconds before the disaster. Calm, professional, focused, trying to manage what looked like a routine issue. Then, silence. Some pieces of the shuttle landed over hundreds of miles across Texas and Louisiana. Even human remains were found during the recovery effort. It was devastating for NASA, for the country, and for everyone who believed in the dream of space exploration. The Columbia Accident Investigation Board uncovered major flaws in NASA's decision-making, communication, and safety culture. Foam strikes were known risks, but they weren't taken seriously enough. That changed after Columbia. NASA grounded the shuttle fleet again, added more inspections, and developed emergency repair procedures. But the shuttle program never fully recovered. Columbia reminded the world that space is still dangerous, and sometimes we don't realize how close we are to disaster until it's too late. These were astronauts at the top of their game, returning from a flawless mission. They were excited to come home, and in an instant, they were gone. 7th Valentin Bondarenko, 1961. A training tragedy. Before anyone ever set foot in space, the dangers were already claiming lives. One of the first and least known space-related deaths happened in complete secrecy. His name was Valentin Bondarenko, a young Soviet cosmonaut, just 24 years old. Bondarenko was part of the very first group of cosmonauts selected by the Soviet Union, training to be among the first humans in space. In March 1961, during a routine medical experiment, he stepped into an isolation chamber. The test was simple. Sit in a sealed room filled with pure oxygen for 10 days to study how the body reacts. But no one expected what happened next. Inside the oxygen-rich environment, Bondarenko accidentally dropped a cotton pad soaked in alcohol onto an electric hot plate. In a normal room, this might have just caused a small flare-up. But in 100% oxygen, the result was instant and brutal. The room turned into a fireball. Bondarenko's synthetic clothing caught fire immediately. The flames were unstoppable. He was trapped inside the chamber, and by the time doctors got to him, he was covered in third-degree burns. over most of his body. He didn't die instantly. He held on for hours in extreme pain, while doctors tried everything to save him. Reports say he was calm and even apologized for causing trouble. He died later that day. The Soviet government kept his death a secret for over 2 decades. It wasn't until the 1980s that the world even knew his name. At the time, the Soviets didn't want to show any weakness in the space race, but Bondarenko's death was a powerful lesson. Just like Apollo 1 year later, it showed how deadly oxygen-rich environments can be. Afterward, both the Soviets and Americans changed their training procedures, materials, and safety protocols. Bondarenko never made it to space. He never got the fame or the glory, but his sacrifice helped shape the safety of spaceflight for everyone who came after him. He was the first to fall in a mission that never launched, but his story still matters. Honoring the fallen hero's space travel is one of the most incredible things humans have ever attempted, but it doesn't come without cost. Every mission we've talked about, Apollo 1, Soyuz 1 and 11, Challenger, Columbia, and even Bondarenko's quiet death behind closed doors, reminds us just how high that cost can be. These astronauts and cosmonauts didn't die because they made mistakes. Most of them did everything right. They trained for years. They followed orders. They trusted the systems and the people around them. They were pioneers, and they paid the ultimate price for being first, for taking risks, and for pushing the boundaries of what's possible. It's easy to think of space travel as something exciting, and it is, but it's also dangerous, brutal, and sometimes unforgiving. One small failure can mean death, and many of the people who lost their lives didn't go quickly. Some burned, some crashed, some suffocated, and worst of all, some of them knew it was coming and couldn't stop it, but they went anyway. Why? Because they believed in something bigger than themselves. They believed in science, in exploration, in reaching for more. They believed the risk was worth it, not just for them, but for all of us back on Earth. We don't just remember these stories to feel sad. We remember them to honor the courage it takes to face the unknown, to never stop pushing forward, even after tragedy. Every one of these disasters led to major safety changes. Lives were saved later because of what was learned from each painful loss. So the next time you see a rocket launch or watch astronauts floating in the space station, think about the ones who never made it back. Think about the fire, the silence, the fall, and the bravery it took to go up there anyway. They were more than astronauts. They were heroes. Thanks for watching. These stories aren't easy to hear, but they're important. They remind us that space isn't just about rockets and glory. It's about people. Brave people who took risks so we could learn, explore, and dream bigger. If you found this video powerful, take a moment to honor these heroes by sharing their stories. Leave a comment with your thoughts or tell us which story hit you the hardest. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the human side of history, science, and space. Until next time, keep looking up, but never forget the price that's been paid to get us there.